What the city is talking about.
The news that impacts you.
Welcome to the Montreal Now podcast.
With Aaron Rand and Natasha Hall.
Welcome to the week that was here on the iHeartRadio network. I'm Aaron Rand along with Natasha Hall, and this week we'll look at these stories. Summer travel season this year is already on track to set a post-pandemic record as more and more people head out after being unable or unwilling to travel for the past few years. And with airline and hotel prices both on the rise, it's going to be more expensive than it has been in years as well. We'll talk to a travel agent to find out what she's seeing and hearing, and maybe to offer some tips on how to make the whole experience a little less stressful.
Are you addicted to TikTok? How about your kids? If it's hard for you to tear yourself away from it, imagine how it's affecting them. Well, a new study by the Reboot Foundation looked into how TikTok is impacting the minds of young people. And yes, it is as worrisome as you might expect. Also, once women turn 50, you start going for mammograms. That's the standard, right? Well, that might be changing to 40. Should it? We spoke to a doctor who had a very interesting take on that.
AI, artificial intelligence. Its ramifications run the gamut from reshaping the education system to subverting foreign governments. We'll talk to a New York Times columnist about her deep dive into AI and who she did and didn't manage to fool. So we have talked about AI, artificial intelligence, chat, GPT, the whole thing. And the more you read on this, the more you begin to realize it's pretty amazing, number one, and pretty scary at the same time. So I come across a column in the Wall Street Journal by our next guest. We spoke earlier this afternoon. And this person decided that she would delve deep into AI and see how it could help her and how, well, do some of the stuff she ordinarily would have to do, how much of it could do, and ultimately to see if it could fool anyone. So this is how our conversation began. Check this out.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me on your show.
Okay. Which sounded...
What do you think?
Yeah, that sounded real, except not a whole lot of...
I'll say, hi, everyone. Thanks for having me on your show.
Well, if that's all AI can do, we have no reason to be concerned. I feel much better just having heard that. You actually spent time and prepared a demo in audio, a demo in video, and you managed to fool people. So tell everybody exactly what you did and how much time, by the way, you invested in this.
Yeah, well, quite a bit of time. But I will say I was more prepared for pranking the people in my family, some colleagues, than I was for pranking you guys. So I don't know if you should take that as a compliment or as an insult.
Well, we'll take it as a compliment.
I set out here to do one main thing, and that was to look at what everyone is talking about in AI video and audio, in the synthetic voice and video world, in the sense that you can create AI clones of yourself in video and in voice. And I worked with two different companies here on this. The first was a company called Synthesia. They do video avatars, AI video avatars, and I had spent quite a bit of time making this avatar with this company. I went to a studio, I shot quite a bit of video with them. I recorded even more audio with them, 2 hours in the studio recording. They take that data, they put it through their neural networks, through their machine learning, and that's what they create. That is what they use to create the video clone. Then I was not as impressed with their audio on that, with the voice, and I had heard of another company called 11 Labs that was making it even easier, more accessible. You go to their site, you upload some previous MP3s or audio clips of you, and it generates a voice. And that was what you just heard here, which I was playing around with the settings, but you can make that sound a lot like you with very little data.
And apparently very little investment too, right? At least at the outset?
Yeah, with 11 Labs, you have to actually pay a $5 per month subscription fee to create your own voice, but that's it.
I mean, that's totally reasonable,
Synthesia
$5.
is more expensive.
Okay. And then
yeah,
what happened?
You have to work with the company. It's at least $1,000 to create the video avatar. So there's more roadblocks to creating the video avatar with Synthesia.
Okay. And then I think what gets scary is what happened next. So, you make the investment, you clone yourself, but then she didn't just fool your family. She fooled institutions like the bank.
That's right. So with the video was not as compelling as I talked about in the piece and showed in the video. It seems a little robotic in places. You can see there's not natural movements, but the voice can be very convincing, not only to when I called my family and had a few things prepared and they sort of started realizing, okay, it sounds like you, but it doesn't actually breathe and you're not saying things in natural conversation. So they were kind of tipped off to it. But it worked very well when calling my bank, because my bank uses voice biometrics as a way to confirm it's you. They use their technology where it asks you to say your name and address, and then it will put you through, if it confirms it's your voice, it will put you through straight to a representative. It won't ask additional verification or security questions. So what I did is I called the bank. When it asked for my name and address, I clicked play on my voice clone, and boom, it recognized it, and I got straight to a representative. No extra questions asked.
Wow, and that's supposed to protect exactly that from happening.
Well, it's supposed to protect that from happening, but it's really meant to be a convenience feature for users. So you don't have to you don't have to go pull out your credit card and read the last 4 digits on the card, or you don't have to give any extra information. It's meant to be a convenience feature from the bank. And what the bank told me was, well, okay, even if you had gotten past this point, which I did, you would need to provide extra information to make changes on your account. If I needed to transfer money, or if I needed to up my credit limit, et cetera, it would have asked for more information.
Okay.
But it still worked. I mean, to the point is it did fool that voice biometric step, which many companies could be using and could be using for more secure information.
I want to know one other thing you did from what I read in the column was you try to see how this would work in meetings. So you do a Zoom meeting, whatever else, and if you have a video avatar and you have AI, how did that play out?
Not so well. Almost as well as the beginning of this show. Again, at first, people sort of thought, okay, there she is, she's nodding along, but it didn't have as natural movements. And so people started wondering, like, why is she just never any different? Specifically, people were saying her posture seems very good, which is a nice commentary on my real life posture. They also said my makeup looks very good, because the day I created my avatar, I got my makeup professionally done. So another nice comment on what real me looks like. But really, when I had the avatar speak, I had preloaded. I had ChatGPT I said, what are the most common phrases in a meeting? I got all of those. I exported them. I had the video ready. They sort of said, that's not how you talk. You're not cracking jokes. You're not naturally responding. So it was not a success, that one. But it was fun. It was very fun.
So what does this tell you going forward? Because I was joking with Aaron before we began that, like, part of me loves this idea of being able to clone myself so that I can get out of doing some of the stuff that I need to do, like particularly school stuff, I would say, for my daughter. But then on the other hand, it's kind of terrifying that it's advancing as quickly as it is.
I think I wanted this to be a marker in time, especially around the video. I think it's going to get rapidly better, and I think it will be, I don't want to say fun, it may be terrifying to look back on this piece in a few years and say, oh, look at this deep fake, it was so bad. Where we are few years in the future, I don't want to predict, and it looks more lifelike, there's more human gestures, there's ways to automate this sort of thing. On the voice, though, this was the most telling thing right now, is how far along these voice clones and these types of technologies are, and how accessible. We talked about that before, the fact that you can go to 11 Labs, anyone can go and make this. There are good uses and there are bad, like any technology, right? Technology is neutral. And so just the accessibility of this type of tool can be great, but also there is the bad side of this is, as I said in the piece, somebody using my voice. I've got tons of my voice out there. You guys have tons of your voice out there. Somebody making a clone, calling family, pretending to be you, asking for information, calling your bank. It's not hard to imagine the bad uses.
Well, okay, well, let me ask you then, how easy is it to do that? You mentioned someone, there's plenty of audio or video of someone out there that someone else could take and say is them. Do the companies that do this actually have safeguards built in? Are they even effective?
11 Labs talked about two specific safeguards. One is the fact, as I mentioned, you have to pay the $5. So people who are using this, they know who you are. They can keep records and have some record of who this person was who created this clone. So if something were to go more viral, or somebody's cloning the voice of our elected officials or candidates, and that all goes viral, they have a sense of, okay, this was created with our tool by this person. The other thing they're working on, and many of these AI companies are looking at, are detection tools that will help us be able to decide or figure out, was this real or was this AI? And so they are looking at tools, and text generators are also looking at tools, and the image generators are also looking at tools of ways for us to put the media into this tool, be able to say, okay, this is with X% confidence AI, or this is X% confidence human.
Does this scare you at all personally?
Yeah.
Like, I'm just thinking as a technology columnist, as a journalist rock star, like our tech guy calls you. Does it make you worried about how you'll be able to do your own job going forward in discerning what is real and what isn't?
Absolutely. And that's why I think some of these tools and the partnerships, Adobe specifically is leading a partnership of lots of media and tech companies at making it more recognizable, transparent to all of us on the internet. What is the origin of the media? Where did it come from? So that is one thing that I think we're going to all have to just be more cognizant of as we look at things on the internet. Was this real? Was it AI generated? How was this image made? How was this video made? How was this audio made? I am scared, especially as someone, as you mentioned in my job. Yes, I plan to use these tools in my job, and I think anyone who is in a job right now is going to have to wonder and reckon with the idea of how am I going to use this? How is this going to better me? How is this going to better my career? Because I've got to get on this train. But I have, as you guys have out there, tons of audio. I have spent years doing videos on YouTube, on thewallstreetjournal.com, various places, and there's a lot of video of me and a lot of audio of me, and that is the training data that's needed. So it isn't anyone listening to your show right now could go make this of me. I'm not telling something, that I can't hide that. That's out there.
Mm-hmm.
Scary indeed, but so interesting and eye-opening at the same time. Hey, Joanna, thank you so much. Appreciate you taking the time today.
Thank you, guys.
You and your
that
clone.
Was really me.
Okay. I was going to say.
How do we know?
Joanna Stern at the Wall Street Journal. Thanks, Joanna.
Thanks, guys.
I love that when you read the column, by the way, and she goes into more in depth how she sort of did the video part, which is in front of a green screen. I mean, she spent some time and effort doing this, but at the end of the day, the fact that you could pull this stuff off and she fooled originally her bank, this is going to be really scary stuff. We've already been warned that.
Informative.
Interactive.
And always interesting.
This is Montreal Now with Aaron Rand and Natasha Hall.
Summer travel season this year is already on track to set a post-pandemic record as more and more people head out after being unable or unwilling to travel for the past few years. And with airline and hotel prices both on the rise, it's going to be more expensive than it has been in years as well. We'll talk to a travel agent to find out what she's seeing and hearing, and maybe to offer some tips on how to make the whole experience a little less stressful. So here we are in the month of May. People starting to think about summer vacations. Interesting poll out the other day as well. We were talking about this earlier on, right? So many Canadians have not used all the vacation days they have. And obviously during the pandemic, no one was going anywhere. Now all of a sudden, airlines are flying, flights are full, and along with that, everything's costing more as well.
It's so expensive.
Tell your story just really quickly, and then we'll get to this.
So we decided to not go visit Dave's relatives in Ireland this summer because we thought that's going to be way too expensive. Instead, we're going to go visit my dad and my stepmom out in BC. That should be more reasonable, right? Wrong. We could fly to Europe probably twice for the price that they want for us to fly, the three of us, to British Columbia. It's just completely bonkers. I know I'm not alone. And I know that travel is a luxury, but when it involves seeing family, it's also a necessity, right? So it makes no sense to me that you can get a 35% discount for a kid to fly to the States or overseas, but if you want to fly domestically, you have to pay the whole price.
So there's one issue. By the way, now that you've said that, are you thinking maybe you will go to Ireland because it'd be less expensive?
No, because I've promised my dad now that we're going out there, so I'm trying to figure out if I can get creative with points.
Okay. So for those of you fortunate enough to be able to A, have the time and B, be able to afford to travel this summer, and as I said, you have to realize and take into account the fact that with no one traveling for the last 2 or 3 years, there's a lot of pent-up demand for this. That's why prices are going up. Christine LATREMOILLE is director of Uniglobe, travel agency here in Montreal. We talk from time to time about how things are going. And since we're talking summer vacation, we thought we'd try to find out exactly what is going on. Christine, thanks for being here this afternoon.
You're very welcome, and how nice it is to be actually saying the words travel and summer all in one sentence.
Yeah, yes. Isn't that the truth?
You're right. So, although we're kind of bracing ourselves in anticipation of nightmares again, is it looking like it's going to be as bad as it has been?
Well, no, I mean, not really nightmares. What we are seeing is there have been a number of flight disruptions, starting with, the big disaster at Christmas time based on weather. But what we're starting to see a bit of a trend in both corporate travel and vacation travel is that flights are not operating as scheduled quite frequently. And there are a lot of reasons for this, of course, but we're hoping that a lot of things get sorted out before the real summer surge starts, which is typically at the end of June and lasts all the way through to the end of September.
So you heard Natasha's dilemma with respect to flying. Here we are domestically, just from one coast to the other, being so wildly expensive. I said, it seems to me from what I'm seeing, airfares are up everywhere. Any recommendation to people other than to just book as early as you can? That used to always be sort of the advisory, but what now?
Well, it's a little bit about where you're going, Natasha. I mean, there's not a lot of competition within Canada. Certainly to Europe, there's a lot more competition in terms of direct and indirect flights. So competition is good for business. In terms of the consumer, we see better pricing. So there's not a whole lot you can do about this other than, as Aaron pointed out, book well ahead and definitely take out some kind of insurance that would allow you some flexibility.
Well, hold on. Where's all those discount airlines? Where's Flair and all the? Don't we have discount airlines now that do this?
They are, but they don't service every city, and their frequency may not be what you're looking for. Maybe once a day, every other day, and then we all had a bit of a scare with Flair. So it's still nothing. It can't compete with airlines as big as WestJet and Air Canada.
And then with regards to airlines offering discounts to fly to the States or overseas, again, is that a question of competition?
Yes, definitely. I mean, if you look to go from here to Italy, you can fly nonstop. You've got several choices nonstop. You've got choices going via the States. You've got choices via going Paris, London, Zurich, Frankfurt, Munich, all kinds of places. And so with options, the price tends to be more competitive.
I started to the point of like trying to book as early as possible. I started looking back in January thinking, okay, if I'm booking, 6 months in advance, I'll get a decent deal. Nope, it was crummy then. And now I'm waiting, hoping that there's going to be a last minute sale. Do you just have to kind of bite the bullet and accept, or is there any hope of any deals at this point?
In general, waiting till the last minute to book just airline tickets is never a good idea. The price just goes up. As the plane fills, the prices go up. So an empty plane will be the better bargain than a plane that's 3/4 full. So they don't put on seat sales for flights that are already at capacity or close to capacity. It just wouldn't be prudent. They charge you more for that, not less. The other thing is that we've seen such a huge surge in travel. We're already booking Christmas of this year and spring break of next year.
Oh my gosh.
So you can imagine everyone last summer who didn't get to go away to Ireland, to Italy, to Greece, and so on, decided, this is the year we're doing it, and they booked well ahead. But the airfares have gone up. The fuel surcharges are there. The infrastructure is more expensive. Sanitation requirements are more expensive. Type of packaging on flights for meals has changed. So those are all contributing factors, and waiting is not going to be your best bet.
So for people who have waited, and as you're alluding to, booking now for Christmas, even next, spring break, with respect to, and I'm sure this question comes up sometimes, vaccinations, what do you have to know? Are there still countries requiring mandatory vaccinations? Is this a country-to-country sort of a thing? What's the situation now?
Well, it's with huge relief that I say, by and large, most vaccination requirements have fallen by the wayside. The United States just announced last week that even non-U.S. citizens and non-immigrants can travel into the United States without proof of vaccination.
Okay.
That was a huge step in the right direction. And most of Europe, I'm going to say most of Europe because I couldn't say possibly what the rest of the world was doing, but certainly most of Asia, Europe, the Caribbean, there are no more restrictions for either proof of vaccination or current COVID tests. Even cruising, for the most part, there are no tests required to board.
So there's some good news. Then the next part of the problem, now you're staying with family, so you don't have to worry about that. But for people out there booking hotels, they have also increased prices, right?
Oh, yes. I mean, let's face it, there were enormous losses over the last 2 years. They'll be recouped one way or another. And with the demand, there doesn't seem to be any problem in people withholding spending money on travel. It just seems to be one of those things that we all need to do.
Christine, would an all-inclusive be a better way to go right now for somebody looking for a little bit of a little bit of an economic choice? I know they're very expensive, so I don't mean to imply that, but I'm just thinking by the time you add up your hotel, your food, your transport and all that, is it looking like all-inclusive might be a better way to go?
It depends where. For the Caribbean, I would suggest, in general, yes, that is the way to go. For Europe, if you're talking about packages that include, a couple meals a day and all your transportation, depends very much what your needs are. Some people are happy to get going with a croissant and a coffee in the morning, and then, by the evening they'll take something simple. And it's a way that you can control your budget. Generally speaking, inclusive or packages that include a lot of components are more affordable because they're negotiated based on bulk stays and bulk commitment of people. But it depends on what your travel style is. But for a family of 3 or 4 or 5, let's say, the all-inclusive is in the South is still going to be the way to go.
So can I ask if there's such a thing? So for summer vacations, are you seeing one particular place for people who are traveling that they seem to want it to go to?
Well, it depends because the summer for the Caribbean has limited air, what we call lifts. So there's not as many destinations that are serviced from Montreal. For the Europe, I would say that this year is still the perennial favorite is Italy, with Portugal and Greece running a close second.
Okay.
Those are destinations that continue to attract people in large numbers.
Okay. Good luck if you can take the time off, if you can afford it, if you actually have the ability to go, and it's going to be interesting. I know they were talking about our local airport here at Trudeau, right? They seem to have worked out all their kinks. I know the guy the director there made a big deal about welcoming passengers and telling them you're not going to have an issue. Have you heard from clients about issues still at Trudeau?
We have not. It's been quite a while since we've had any nightmare stories about big delays going through security and or waiting for your luggage. Maybe as little as a month ago, people were still waiting up to an hour for their bags from certain flights. Depends what time of day, of course. A lot of flights come in the evening from overseas. But no, nightmare stories, we're not hearing those anymore. It's gotten much better at Trudeau. It's gotten much better at Pearson. So we're seeing a gradual improvement. The only worrying thing on the horizon is that there is a shortage of crew. There's a shortage of flight attendants and specifically pilots. That's contributing to a lot of delayed and or canceled flights. And that's a little bit what's on our horizon in terms of things to worry about.
So we're out of time, but just maybe you could rapid fire give us like 3 or 4 destinations if you're still looking for somewhere this summer that might be attainable and not a total ripoff.
Or maybe a bargain, yeah, if there are such.
Cancun remains one of the top favorites simply because there is so much inventory there. There's so many hotels, so many different areas and types of hotels that it continues to be very competitive, with Punta Cana running a close second. But as I said earlier, it's very difficult to get to a lot of the Caribbean islands with a non-stop flight in the summer. So those aren't necessarily competitive. So I would say to you, Cancun, despite some of the poor media press that it's gotten, there is a lot of good things to recommend about that area, and Puerto Vallarta as well. So Cancun is our top one, followed by Punta Cana.
Okay.
Excellent. Thanks.
Christine, thank you so much. Appreciate your time today. Christine LATREMOILLE over at Uniglobe Travel. Thanks, Christine.
You're so welcome.
Take
Bye-bye.
care. Bye-bye now.
Informative,
Interactive,
and always interesting.
This is Montreal Now with Aaron Rand and Natasha Hall.
Are you addicted to TikTok? How about your kids? If it's hard for you to tear yourself away from it, imagine how it's affecting them. Well, a new study by the Reboot Foundation looked into how TikTok is impacting the minds of young people. And yes, it is as worrisome as you might expect.
Now, speaking of TikTok, as we were just before the break, and the fact that, I'm on it, Natasha's not, and your daughter's not on it either, is she?
I don't know.
You don't let her.
Listen, she has found a way through YouTube Shorts to watch some TikTok videos.
Okay.
The same way I see some of them on Instagram sometimes, but she does not have the app. She has not downloaded it, and I don't want her to.
So HELEN BOUYGUES is president of the Reboot Foundation, an expert on digital literacy and critical thinking skills. And obviously the concern here is for young adults, young people, and the impact that TikTok can and apparently does have on them. So let's try to find out what should be doing, or what should we be doing here, and is there reason for concern? Helen, start off with that. Is there reason for concern as far as young people on TikTok, as far as you're concerned?
There is a significant reason for concern. One is, as you guys alluded to, the amount of usage of TikTok is really disturbing. An average teenager spends more than 2 hours a day, and over 23% actually use it 4+ hours a day.
Wow.
So it's the pure usage. And then secondly, the other challenge is 42% of heavy users actually consider all of information on TikTok as reliable information. And actually they use social media, especially TikTok, about 91% uses it to gather information. Compared to, for example, newspapers, they only use less than 50% to do research. So it's not only the amount of usage, but it's also the influence it has. And unfortunately, as you know, approximately 1 out of 5 videos on TikTok actually does carry misinformation. So we're really not helping our children be good consumers of information today.
That's disturbing in and
I'll
of
say.
itself, obviously. And the fact that, and it's not just TikTok, I guess we can talk social media that way as well. The fact that you see something online, be it on TikTok or Instagram or whatever, you automatically assume as a young person, no, it must be accurate. It's on TikTok. You question virtually nothing.
It's that. It's the certification, the verification, and the perception of what that means. Verified accounts, it's purely just checking IDs to make sure that people are not impersonating.
Right.
But in reality, young children believe that indicates it's a reliable source of information. So there's that dimension. And then, unfortunately, based on our survey, the number of followers for our young children gives implication as to whether or not they're reliable sources as well.
I'm finding all of this so troublesome. And then beyond that, I just think the addictive nature of it is very troublesome. I wonder what kind of effect that has on their brains, especially developing brains, and just their mental health. What do we know about that, Helen Lee?
So one of the dimensions that we checked and asked questions to these young adults was their appreciation of science, because that kind of indicates a little bit of education. And one question that we kind of did as a throwaway question, but unfortunately the result came back very disturbingly, is for young users, basically 13 to 17-year-old teens of heavy TikTok users, they actually were willing to give up give up their right to vote for a year. Over 64% said that they would give up their voting rights for a year rather than losing access to their social media accounts for 1 year. So what does that say about democracy and our actual belief in situations? And then secondly, another statistic that I wanted to share with you is for heavy users of TikTok, over 42% disagree that science actually helps the world more than it harms, versus 75% in general. And in terms of influences on beliefs in science and vaccines, and also even astrology or numerology, the perception of these young adults is that actually astrology and numerology is similar to science. So you start seeing certain statistics based on heavier usage of TikTok relative to those that use less than 1 hour. Now, I mentioned less than 1 hour per day, not per week. There is a massive difference in terms of these perceptions of junk science as well. So the usage, there's not a causality, but there is a correlation relative to heavy use, and unfortunately, the link even to appreciation of science.
I guess one of the questions has to be, so as a parent, you're going to have to make this decision. Clearly, you have, at least at this point, right? Your daughter's only 11.
Yeah, as long as I can.
But what are we expecting governments to do? I mentioned off the top that, of course, governments tell their own people, we don't want you using the TikTok if you're involved in it. That's dangerous. But how do you regulate this as far as kids go? Can you?
Well, in the U.S., at least, there is more and more talk about actually banning social media for children under, for example, 13 years old. That's been receiving pretty much bipartisan support at the Senate. In Europe, there is more and more discussions around. In France, for example, it did pass Senate, although it hasn't passed through law, to actually prohibit usage of, not prohibit, but requiring parental permission for children under 15 years old to be able to have access to social media. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, that's not enough because, as you know, our youngsters, they know how to sidestep these things anyway in terms of their application so much better than we do. And also, how do you actually truly enforce age verification? Those are still things that are not completely clear in terms of how governments work with these social media companies. So really the solution needs to be in parallel. In addition to regulation, parents need to play a more active role. And, as you mentioned, to keep them for as long a period of time away from social media is one thing. But I think also just educating your children and making sure that they are have better media literacy skills, checking who the sources are, trying to understand what might be the basis of why certain videos are being created, and having good critical thinking skills, including thinking about perspectives of views that are opposing to those relative to our preconceived notions. So those are things that parents can practice to help our children become better consumers of information.
Fair enough. Helen Lee, I want to thank you so much for your time. Very much appreciated today.
Thank you.
Helen Lee Bouygues, president of the Reboot Foundation. TikTok and your kids, what was that number? The average child spends 2 hours per day scrolling through TikTok videos.
And many spend 4 hours.
That's insane.
That's teens. Oof.
Informative,
Interactive,
and always interesting.
This is Montreal Now with Aaron Rand and Natasha Hall.
Once women turn 50, you start going for mammograms. That's the standard, right? Well, that might be changing to 40. Should it? We spoke to a doctor who had a very interesting take on that. So for as long as I can remember, the recommended age for women to start getting mammograms was always 50. You turn 50, you start getting your mammograms. Well, that has changed, and it has changed because more women in their 40s are being diagnosed with breast cancer. That is sobering information. We thought it's a very good idea to find out more. Dr. CHRIS LABOS joins us now. Thank you so much for your time today, Dr. LABOS.
Oh, my pleasure.
Let me just mention you're a cardiologist with a degree in epidemiology, and we can catch you Sunday mornings at 8:10 right here on CJAD on Weekends with Ken. So the new recommendation is 10 years earlier. What's the information specifically that led to this changing?
So that's a very complex question because, first of all, it's actually not an official recommendation yet. It's the draft guidelines from the U.S. Centers for it's the United States Preventative Services Task Force. This is the organization that makes recommendations about screening for a whole variety of things, and they have had standing recommendations for about mammograms for a while. And you're right that for average risk individuals, so women who are not at high risk, the starting age has been at 50, but they've always had the caveat that in certain high-risk individuals, you could start at 40 if there were certain risk factors and once you assess the risks and the benefits of doing screening. So starting mammograms at 40 has always been an option once you've discussed it with your doctor to understand what are some of the potential drawbacks. What's changed now is because they update these things every few years, the draft of the next guidelines has suggested that they're going to lower that age to 40, and so this is when they sort of elicit comments and before they issue the final statements. What's a little bit interesting about this, and a few people have commented about this, it's not as if there's been new information in the past 5 years that would get them to change their recommendations. So it's not as if there's been a new study or new data. What this really reflects is part of the problem or some of the subtlety that involves all forms of cancer screening is that when you start screening, age cutoffs and risk cutoffs are to a certain degree subjective things. And when it comes to mammograms, the trade-off in lowering the age cutoff at doing it at younger ages, well, there's a few trade-offs. Number one, mammograms become less accurate as you get into younger women because breast tissue becomes denser and the mammograms are not as good. But you also get into lower and lower risk groups, and so the trade-offs become false positives, unnecessary biopsies, over-treatment. So there is a downside to screening. It's just a question of are you willing to accept it or not. And for the most part, we as a society, when it comes to breast cancer, have said we are willing to tolerate a little bit of over-treatment if it means catching these cancers early. But the more you push down that threshold, the more you're going to have that trade-off. This is where you're seeing the scientific argument. Do you do it at 50? Do you do it at 40? Do you do it at 45? And different groups have come up with different age cutoffs over the years. So this has been a bit of a fluctuating target over the past 10 to 20 years.
Okay. And if I understood correctly, like I think once you turn 50, the recommendation is it to get a mammogram every year, Dr. Labos?
So that's the other thing. So the some places have recommended yearly. Most places recommend every 2 years. Mm-hmm. And that's because most breast cancers are fairly slow-growing ones. And so 2 years has been seen to be sufficient. But then again, that's another point that people raise. Like, should it be every 2 years? Should it be every 1 year? Should average-risk women get every 2 years and higher-risk women get it every year? These are the types of trade-offs. And again, there is a feeling out there. If you sort of ask people their gut reaction, it's always, well, let's do more. The more we do, the better off we're going to do. But more healthcare isn't always better healthcare. And it's the same types of trade-offs. It's more expensive to do mammograms every year, obviously. And the question becomes, does that mean better diagnosis? Does that mean catching cancers earlier? Does that mean preventing mortality? And these are not as obvious questions to answer as people think they are. And so there's always this trade-off between doing as much as possible and doing as much as necessary to prevent outcomes. And so even the interval of mammogram screening is something that is debated, and you have different groups suggesting different cutoffs.
Okay, so what I'm gathering here is that it's not necessarily that more women in their 40s are getting breast cancer, it's that we're doing more extensive screening, so we're catching it more.
Exactly. That's the thing. This is the inherent, not the problem. It's perhaps problem is the wrong word, but this is the inherent trade-off. It's a question of overdiagnosis, because you will catch breast cancers if you do mammograms. The question you have to ask yourself, is that early tumor, would that have turned into breast cancer that would have metastasized and killed somebody? And you don't know that in advance. And so a lot of the breast cancers that are treated may not have ever turned into full-blown cancers. And there's been another debate going on, is that if you just see a cluster of atypical cells, should we even be calling that cancer? Should we be calling those atypical lesions? Because if you think as a corollary of colonoscopies, if you go for a colonoscopy and they find the polyp and they remove it, we don't call that colon cancer, we call that a polyp. That polyp might have turned into colon cancer and we removed it to prevent that from happening. But that wasn't a cancer diagnosis. And so now you get into an interesting discussion of, should these abnormal findings on mammograms even be considered cancer or not? Now, we call it that because that's how the language has evolved. But we don't know going into this conversation with the patient, is this thing going to turn into breast cancer or not? And because we don't know, we, for the most part, decide to just treat it because the treatments for breast cancer have evolved and improved drastically over the past few decades. We went from radical mastectomies to minimally invasive lumpectomies. Mm-hmm. Radiation therapy has gotten so much better in terms of preserving the normal tissue around the tumor, and the chemotherapy has improved, especially with the advent of the new hormonal therapies, things like tamoxifen and Arimidex, which are very successful and have virtually no side effects. So because the treatment has gotten better, we are now more willing to tolerate over-treatment, because when you start the process, you don't know what the final outcome of an abnormal mammogram finding is going to be.
Okay, so it sounds to me like we stick with the information we already have. 50 is currently the recommendation here in Canada. Anything that men, and we've only got 30 seconds left, Dr. Labos, but anything that men need to know about detection of breast cancer?
In men, the issue of breast cancer is really for the people who have like a BRCA mutation, so it's usually genetic. The average population is not at any type of meaningful risk.
Okay. Excellent. So great, as always. Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. You take care.
That wraps up another edition of The Week That Was here on the iHeartRadio Network. I'm Aaron Rand, along with Natasha Hall, and we will see you next week.
Have a great week.
This has been the Montreal Now podcast with Aaron Rand and Natasha Hall.
Listen live on your radio weekday afternoons from 2 to 6
on CJAD 800
or through the iHeartRadio app.